For better or worse, Star Trek Voyager has some truly memorable episodes. There are those remembered for being epic and explosive, such as the Season 4 two-parter Year of Hell, or the show's 100th episode Timeless. There are others which are remembered for their controversial storylines. Looking at you, Tuvix. And then there are the ones that everyone remembers, but maybe for the wrong reasons. Threshold. But whilst viewers forever discuss these common few, what about the unfortunate episodes that get lost in the fold? The less than amazing stories that become overshadowed by the best and worst of the batch. Now, to be clear, we're not suggesting that these are bad episodes, but rather the underlings, carrying Voyager to its 26 episode count per season, while maintaining a low profile amid the higher achievers. Let me put this into words that all Voyager fans will understand. Think of these episodes as Chakotay in the later seasons. There, but relegated to the background. So with that in mind, I'm Ellie for TrekCulture, and here are the 10 most forgettable Star Trek Voyager episodes. Number 10, Alice. Remember when Tom Paris became obsessed with a shuttle? No, not the Delta Flyer. In fact, in this season's 6th episode, his beloved Flyer and even his beloved B'Elanna are forsaken for the titular Alice. After arriving at an interstellar junkyard, Paris persuades Chakotay that this derelict shuttlecraft, aptly named Alice after a lost cause from his academy days, would be a worthwhile investment for Voyager, and quickly gets to work on fixing it up. Soon though, what started as a hobby turns into an unhealthy obsession, abetted by the interface of Alice appearing to Paris in the form of a beautiful woman. Under her influence, Paris swaps his Starfleet uniform for a grey flight suit, neglects his duties, bails on holodeck plans with Harry, demands and then later steals supplies and equipment, and completely overlooks his relationship with B'Elanna. Of course, by the end of the episode, Paris is saved and the Voyager crew live on to journey another day. Now, one of the biggest factors for Alice flying under the radar is that it had the unfortunate position of being sandwiched between fan-favourite episode Tinker Tenor Dr. Spy and the higher-stakes storyline of Riddles. The proposed implications in these two stories are far more engaging than that of Alice. Viewers are invested in the trials and tribulations of the EMH attempting to enhance his program, and the comical tones of Tinker Tenor Dr. Spy adds an extra layer of memorability. Likewise, the prospect of Tuvok losing his intelligence and emotional control is engaging for viewers who are used to the stoic nature of Vulcan characters. By comparison, Alice doesn't really show viewers anything unusual or unexpected. Tom Paris, while on a path of redemption, is a character notorious for his brash ideas and selfish behaviour, and therefore the events of this episode, while extreme, aren't particularly surprising and by extension aren't particularly memorable. Number 9, Nightingale. Oh, Harry, the forever ensign. Many fans have joked and criticised the absence of a promotion for Harry Kim in the 7 years that Voyager travelled the Delta Quadrant. However, the events of Season 7 episode Nightingale might just remind said fans as to why Harry didn't receive any more pips. After responding to a distress call while out in the Delta Flyer, Harry Kim finds himself caught in the middle of a war between the Kraylor and the Inari. Under the illusion that the Kraylor ship is transporting medical supplies, Harry agrees to take temporary command of the vessel and help them return home. Along the way, however, not only does it become clear that the Kraylor have not been entirely truthful, forcing Harry to break the Prime Directive, but Captain Kim also demonstrates extremely poor leadership skills in his first solo command. Alongside this main thread, there's also the rather odd subplot of Icheb wrongly assuming that B'Elanna has developed romantic feelings for him. So why is this particular episode seldom remembered? Well, similar to Alice, this episode is preceded by one with more comedic undertones in the form of the EMH and 7 of 9 sharing a body in body and soul, and succeeded by the hard-hitting flesh and blood. Beyond that, however, for as much as we all love him, it is a hard truth that Harry Kim is not as exciting a character as the likes of 7 of 9 or the Doctor. By this point in the show, it's a common observation that Voyager had become more focused on Janeway, 7 and the EMH, while the rest of the characters were given less invigorating storylines. And Nightingale is a perfect example of this. Rather than gracing Harry with a story of triumph and even the achievement of a much-anticipated promotion, the writers delivered an episode that once again put Mr. Kim down. While it was a great lesson in learning through failing, Viewers would have been far more likely to remember this episode if it had been the one where Harry Kim was finally given a promotion. Number 8. Random Thoughts. This Season 4 story perhaps deserves more recognition than it gets. The premise of Random Thoughts explores the notion of craving something forbidden and presents an interesting allegory for the extreme lengths someone might go to obtain such contraband. On a planet where crime is all but eradicated, B'Elanna is arrested after her violent thoughts supposedly influence an attack in the marketplace. With Tuvok working to prove her innocence and prevent the punishment of a risky engramic purge, he uncovers a black market network dealing in violent thoughts. Now, this particular episode suffers two misfortunes. As is a common theme with many entries on this list, Random Thoughts directly follows the epic two-parter Year of Hell. Airing in the shadow of such a popular and memorable story meant that this episode was destined to be forgotten, despite its premise and unexpected twist. On top of that, this is another episode that suffers from a lack of creativity with regards to its characters. While there is a great twist in the plot itself, the characters behave predictably. It comes as no surprise that it's the half-Klingon character who's accused of violence, and it's equally unsurprising that Tuvok channels his inner Sherlock Holmes to crack the case, or that Paris wants to ignore protocol and break B'Elanna free. Hell, even Neelix keeps things consistent, setting his sights on pursuing yet another impressionable young woman in an entirely unnecessary micro-subplot, which ultimately ends in said young woman's murder. Of course, it wouldn't be logical for every episode to explore established characters acting unusual. That would completely undermine the impact of the instances when it does happen. But naturally, it is those storylines that remain more memorable, and unfortunately, Random Thoughts just isn't such a story. Number 7. Alter Ego. Holodeck episodes are such a clever tool in Star Trek. They allow a break in the usual structure of space and aliens, offering the chance for a story based in history or fiction. And this lends itself really well to Voyager, where the characters are often missing the luxuries of home or require a distraction from their hapless situation. Alter Ego started as a promising holodeck story, but by the end had fallen back into the space and alien format. Poor Harry Kim is struggling to deal with the heartache of developing feelings for a holodeck character, Morena. He goes to Tuvok for help in suppressing his emotions, and ends up introducing Morena to a more desirable match. Ouch. It's later revealed that Morena is not actually a holodeck character, but a lonely alien on a nearby space station seeking companionship in her isolated duty. Now, the biggest problem with Alter Ego is that it contains plot threads that are explored far better elsewhere. Compared to the likes of The Killing Game, Worst Case Scenario, Bride of Chaotica, or even Real Life, the holodeck setting is entirely forgettable and somewhat secondary to the plot. And let's not forget Fairhaven, which, as well as being a massively divisive and therefore memorable holodeck episode, also explores the consequences of a holodeck romance in much greater detail than this story does. Even the love triangle element isn't something unique to this story. Season 2 had already explored this concept with Neelix, Paris, and Kes. That plot, however, made more character sense, with Neelix feeling threatened by Tom's flirtatious charm, whereas a conflict between the shy Harry Kim and stoic Tuvok over the affections of a never-seen-before hologram just seemed too random and fleeting to be remembered in any great detail. Number 6. Muse. When it comes to Muse, it would seem that the writers took a risk that ultimately didn't quite land as successfully as they had hoped. In this Season 6 episode, B'Elanna crash lands the Delta Flyer on a pre-warp planet. She's discovered by a local playwright who believes she is an Eternal and uses her logs and experiences to inspire his writings. Now, the main risk that this episode took was to forego a discernible conflict for Voyager's crew and focus on a more thought-provoking metaphorical plot in the form of Greek-style theatre. The irony, of course, being that the entire purpose of Muse is to provide a meta-commentary on the lazy nature of writers relying too heavily on big twists and adrenaline-fueled set pieces, rather than the deeper truth and purpose of storytelling. While it is certainly a commendable effort, and to the more analytical of viewers a truly ingenious feat of meta-storytelling, a message delivered with regards to a fictional play within a fictional television series about the nature of fiction, to the more casual viewers it simply didn't appeal. Star Trek has never shied away from lacing its episodes with allegorical plot threads, but this particular commentary lacked the usual conflict or high stakes that make other examples far more memorable. It's also worth considering the previous episode Live Fast and Prosper, which also centered around the idea of Voyager crew members being played by someone else. By comparison though, Muse went for a more straight-laced approach, whereas Live Fast and Prosper had a more comical tone to the impersonations. Now, although they are significantly different stories, airing one directly after the other despite these similar themes means that the comedic episode will likely be better remembered over the cerebral one. Number 5. Non Seiter. As we previously mentioned, a show like Voyager must get creative with the structure of its stories so as not to become too repetitive or predictable. Another way this is achieved in Star Trek is through episodes focused on time travel and alternate realities. These themes are explored many times throughout Voyager, with Season 2's Non Seiter being one of the earliest examples. Harry Kim wakes up in his San Francisco apartment with his fiancée Libby, having never been a crew member on the USS Voyager. Evading Starfleet, who think he's either crazy or a spy, he discovers that his reality has been altered after a collision with a temporal anomaly, and with a little help from a snarky pre-caretaker Tom Paris, works to recreate the accident in the hope of returning to his original timeline. Now, there are a few reasons why this episode gets lost in the fold. First and foremost, the majority of the main Voyager cast are absent for most of the runtime. Besides Harry and Tom, we only see Janeway, Chakotay, Tuvok and B'Elanna very briefly in the closing 2 minutes, while Neelix, Kes and the EMH don't appear at all. Of course, it is common for the main focus to switch between the core players from episode to episode, but in this instance, the absence of so many recognisable characters caused viewers to lose interest. Following that point, we once again return to the sad truth of Harry Kim not being as enticing a character as others. Perhaps viewers would have remembered this particular storyline in greater detail had it been Paris or Janeway affected by this reality shift. Viewers were already familiar with the relationship between Janeway and Mark, so it may have had a stronger emotional value to witness the turmoil of this dilemma on the captain rather than the less established relationship of Harry. Non Seiter also suffers the common factor of following the laughably memorable elogium. Now, while this is far from being one of Voyager's best, it almost certainly overshadows this story, and for all the wrong reasons. Number 4. Natural Law. Chakotay became somewhat obsolete in the later years of Voyager. The earlier seasons explored his involvement with the Marquis, his native spirituality, a complex manipulative storyline with Seska, and even teased a potential romance between the Commander and Captain Janeway. By Season 7, however, Chakotay was one of the few characters lacking any depth or personal plot threads. And that's where Natural Law comes in. Chakotay and 7 of 9 crash their shuttle within a shielded area of a planet where they encounter a primitive yet curious species. While rather poorly attempting to maintain the Prime Directive, the pair work to salvage enough equipment from the wreckage to contact Voyager for assistance. This episode was meant to introduce a relationship between Chakotay and 7, to be revisited a few episodes later in Endgame. This relationship wasn't popular, and the biggest issue comes from how abrupt and underdeveloped it seemed. Now, for an episode designed to establish a budding romance, the pair spend a great portion of the story separated. This relationship only appeared in a small number of episodes towards the end of Season 7, and of those few, this one is by far the most forgettable. Now, Endgame obviously established a potential future marriage between the pair, as well as being the explosive series finale. And then there's the hugely divisive human error, which is still discussed and criticised to this very day. Number 3. Emanations. Sadly, yet unsurprisingly, we have another Harry Kim episode. And Emanations holds the status of being Voyager's very first Harry-centric story. While investigating what appears to be a burial site found on an asteroid, Harry Kim is somehow transported to an unknown planet whilst a seemingly dead alien woman materializes in his place on Voyager. The beings on this planet believe that after death they move on to a greater afterlife. Harry's arrival places doubt on that theory, and he is eager to return to Voyager before he can interfere too much with their cultural beliefs. Though the examination of different cultural rituals and beliefs about death is certainly a thought-provoking topic, Emanations lacks anything epic or challenging to stick in the memory of viewers. The solution to Harry's return is obvious: go back through the same rift that brought him. Yet it takes the entire episode to achieve, despite there being very little conflict or restriction. Okay, yes, the planet's doctor does insist on analysing Harry's biology, but he isn't a prisoner per se. If he'd been locked in a cell or physically restrained in some way, then his plight to escape and activate the cenotaph would have added a level of thrill and anticipation to the episode. Season 1 had already introduced the high-stakes conflict between Voyager and both the Kazon and the Vidians, so a standalone tame story such as Emanations gets lost in the crowd. And it's also followed by Prime Factors, which explores the desperate measures certain crew members are willing to take to find a way home. Another episode with much more relatable and emotional stakes for both the crew, but also the viewers. Number 2, Gravity. Season 5 boasts some of the most popular and unforgettable episodes of Voyager's entire run. Unfortunately, this means that an even greater shadow hangs over the remaining stories. Gravity is one such episode. In this mid-season story, Tom, Tuvok, and the EMH are pulled through a spatial sinkhole. Over the months that they are stranded, Nos, an alien woman who they encounter on the planet, falls in love with Tuvok, who struggles to return her affections. Spliced between flashbacks of Tuvok's youth, Tom tries to convince the Vulcan to indulge his emotions and allow himself and Nos to be happy. Directly following Bride of Chaotica, a fan-favourite episode remembered greatly for its humorous holodeck plot and unique creative style, a shadow was cast over this more conventional Star Trek story, and the epic Borg drama of Dark Frontier aired just 2 weeks later. Tuvok's struggles with emotions have been explored before too. Unfortunately, the instances where he is battling a more aggressive outburst, such as Season 2's Meld or Season 7's Repression, or even facing a distressing internal struggle for control, like Season 3's Flashback or Season 6's Riddles, tend to be more memorable than a rather tame love story. Despite a wonderful guest performance from Lori Petty and its perfectly fine story, Gravity just doesn't display anything particularly unique or invigorating to keep it etched in the memories of Voyager's viewers. Number 1. Unforgettable. Never has an episode been more inaccurately and ironically titled as Season 4's Unforgettable. Voyager comes across an alien woman, Kellen, who claims to have been on board the ship before, yet no one has any memory of her. She further claims that she and Chakotay had fallen in love in that time, and hopes that they can rekindle those feelings. Despite having no recollection of their previous relationship, Chakotay falls in love with her all over again, just for Kellen to have her memories erased by episode's end and leaving Chakotay to return home instead. Now, as with many other examples, there is the unfortunate disadvantage of being followed by Living Witness, an episode often described as Voyager's closest comparison to the Mirror Universe. But the truth is, Unforgettable has plenty of other downsides too. Even the guest appearance of Virginia Madsen wasn't enough to keep this one in viewers' minds. Perhaps much of the issue comes from how unrealistic the premise is, even for Star Trek. Similar to the criticism of the relationship between Chakotay and Seven of Nine, we once again see the commander fall head over heels for a woman in a matter of days, simply on the basis that she says they loved each other before. It verges into the ridiculous, and viewers are led to feel more uncomfortable by their interactions rather than invested in a happy ending. There's also an air of pointlessness to the entire plot. It opens with Chakotay having no memory of his relationship with Kellen. It closes in the exact same position, with nothing lost or gained for the crew or their journey. As such, viewers are likely to dismiss the events just as easily as the crew managed to forget them. Oh, the irony. And that concludes my list, but of course it's entirely a matter of opinion, so if you think I missed a vital one, then do let me know in the comments down below. Also, we are so close to 300,000 subscribers here on YouTube, so if you haven't already, make sure you hit that subscribe button. And head over to the various socials and give us a follow over there as well. I've been Ellie for TrekCulture. I hope you have a wonderful day, and remember to boldly go where no one has gone before.